the airline said, we want female flight attendants and attractive ones. We're going to dress them in hot pants. And now, suppose they really did get more customers. Is it a legitimate customer preference to want a scantily clad flight attendant?
But I wouldn't make that judgment in terms of having the government come in and intervene, and I think that's a perfectly reasonable business proposition.
Should there be a law preventing companies from hiring people based on whether they're good looking or not? Take the example of Abercrombie. Who can tell us what Abercrombie sells or what it's like in there? Ryan?
It's a clothing store. They sell upmarket clothes, and they're generally focused on a very polished, upscale look. The reason why it's controversial is that they're known to hire extremely attractive models and store clerks, which is consistent with their brand image.
To model the clothes or to sell the clothes?
Both.
Nicole, how would you characterize the people who sell the clothing?
Tall, largely white and blonde-haired. From what I've seen, they not only choose really attractive people, but a certain type of attractive person.
And how would you describe kind of a
preppy look? Yeah.
There was a discrimination complaint against Abercrombie for employment discrimination based on looks. Lookism, I suppose you might call it. Should there be a law against stores like Abercrombie hiring people based on their looks? Matthew, you're unsure.
I'm just worried about the rights of the company to employ the kinds of people they want. The people who are not employed can find work elsewhere.
If it was a business where hiring people of a certain makeup is very fundamental, then I would make exceptions.
But what would an example of a clear case be where it's okay, in your view, to discriminate based on physical appearance because physical appearance, attractiveness is so fundamental to the job?
So an example for me would be modeling certain clothing. Some clothes are built to fit certain body types, for example.
So in hiring models, it's okay to discriminate based on looks, but in hiring people to sell in a retail store, it's not?
If it's fundamental to the actual purpose and role of the job, then I say it's okay. But in the case of being a salesperson, where the job can be performed by people regardless of their physical stature, then no, I don't.
Ellie?
As a model, your merit is how attractive you are. Your merit is how good you are at staying thin and looking after your skin. And I think that in those circumstances, then we have to have a free market in what people look like. But I think in terms of being a doctor or being a teacher, or I think the Abercrombie example is that great line.
Well, I disagree with Jamie and with Ellie too about the point that some people should be hired based on their attractiveness. Where would you draw the line between jobs that are required to be attractive and are not?
But I think there are clearly examples where you would have to allow discrimination based on looks. And for example, the acting industry. It would be very difficult to function if you could not discriminate based on how an actor looks and how they can achieve that role.
Nicole?
I think that if you want to change norms in our society about what beauty looks like, then you have to stop doing things like that. Abercrombie sells this look because they're already discriminating. They don't sell appropriate sizes. Their CEO calls people fat all the time and says he doesn't want them in their stores. The two practices are clearly related.
So you want the law against lookism to combat bad attitudes in the society?
Yes.
There are various traits that employees have, and nobody complains if you hire people who are smarter or physically more productive. And I think physical attractiveness is really analogous to those other things.
To intelligence?
Definitely analogous to intelligence. And they can both be important in terms of making the business more effective, attracting customers, and they're kind of equally unfair in terms of how they're distributed unequally among the population.
So if someone is turned down for a job at Abercrombie because they don't have the look, is it unfair to them?
Well, it's unfair in some sense. It's unfair because they didn't have the basic endowment or enough of it, and I say that could be intelligence just as much as physical attractiveness. I think it's better if the government allows the market to operate, and then if you don't like the outcomes in terms of the distribution of income, for example, I think it's better to attack that directly through transfer programs and basic social safety net, those kinds of things.
My instinct would be that employers get to hire people who will be good at doing their jobs. And so I would expect Harvard to have a bias in favor of professors who are smart. The Boston Celtics very disproportionately hire tall people. I would think it was reasonable to hire people who are more successful in selling clothes. I suspect there are certain physical characteristics that are a bit more associated with economic success than others, and I don't think that's something that would be easy to remedy by law.
You mentioned height. I think some studies have shown that tall people make more on average than short people, maybe 10% more, something like that. Is that unfair?
Unfair or not, you're going to observe that in any market economy, indeed in any society, that the distribution of rewards is unequal. I would be much more worried if there was a characteristic that had a strong relationship to what people earned that didn't have any relationship to their effectiveness in doing their jobs. And there is a greater tendency for people who are taller to be able to exercise leadership. And so if they're rewarded for that, that's not something that would trouble me.
They might be selling a fantasy. And people might be, it's almost like going to the movies. Most people do not want to see a sad ending. For that 2-hour window, they are catapulted into some sort of a fantasy land. And it's the same way the fashion industry, they are selling a fantasy, and people are drawn into their shops for that reason.
But isn't that objectionable on the grounds that the people are being objectified?
We're making a value judgment, right, about whether those people are good looking or not. The reason that these businesses are choosing those people is because they believe they can sell more products. Do I, from the very pure lens of economics, think there's something objectionable about it? No. If people are adults and they're making those choices, then I don't see why the heavy hand of the law needs to step in and say they can't do that. However, from a moral standpoint, it's sort of the debate around prostitution. I don't really like the idea, but I can rationally get my head around it.